Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here again. We're at the first ever LAC Summit, and we're here for our very first keynote address from Anand Mahadevan. We've got a whole week of sharing and learning this week, and so I hope that you keep coming back again and again because each of our sessions are going to be such excellent learning opportunities, especially this one. And before we jump in with today's session, I just want to take a moment to tell you a little bit about this summit, why we're doing it, who we are. So my name is Emma Burns. I'm the coordinator of professional learning at Consilience, which is the organization that runs the Learning Analytics Collaborative and is the sponsor of this event. So the LAC is really special because it's a community that we create and it's an opportunity that we have to learn and grow together at events like this one. So for anyone who's not aware, this is just a little bit about the LAC and what we do. If you've got any questions after this, please reach out because we'd be so happy to show you a demo call and see what we can do for you. Our mission is really to support you to build cultures of data use in your school. And we help schools use data to make an impact. So the way we do that is we collect all the data that you have in the school, not just your academic data. We also collect your demographics, well-being, HR, any data you have in your school, and we collaborate with you to figure out the best way to present that data as information. And then we teach the users at your school how to use that information, and we provide protocols and tools so that your community can gain insight about your learners. We've got over 100 visualizations. Each one of them has been customized for schools to answer the questions that schools have. And so you can see we've got dashboards for teachers wanting to know more about the students in their class, dashboards for specialists like learning support and EAL to understand the impact of their interventions, aggregate dashboards for admin, board, HR, which we're going to be looking at a little bit today, and dashboards for parents and students to zoom in and see personalized learning data over time. We have over 50 schools in our collaborative, and we're all about sharing the learning. So when one school develops a use case or develops a different kind of visualization for an assessment, we share that information with other schools so that everyone can learn and grow. And to do that, we publish case studies, we share protocols. And can you see where I'm going with this? We're also doing, for the first time, a summit where every school can come together and share how they're learning and growing and developing those cultures of data use. So today was the first day of our summit, and I'm delighted to end the first day with our keynote from Anand Mahadevan. He is the Executive Director from the Canadian Accredited Independent Schools. And he's really responsible for bringing the LAC to Canada. We were just chatting before, and he was telling me that all our Canada schools in the collaborative, he has really helped to spread the word and bring this program to these schools. So we're really excited to hear about his journey and what he's doing with data and using data to help schools grow. If you have any questions, please just pop them in the chat, and we'll ask them at the end of the session. So I'm really excited to hand over to Anand. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Emma. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to just share my screen. And this is going to be a different sort of presentation from the other keynotes that you're going to see over the summit, because I'm going to be speaking from an association lens rather than a school lens. And so, as Emma noted, I'm the Executive Director of the Canadian Accredited Independent Schools Association. So, who are we and why does it matter? In this talk, the work that you're going to see is primarily inspired by work of Amanda Datnow, Jenny Donohue, Stephen Katz, and others. Amanda Datnow is a data-informed school improvement practitioner out of the University of California system. Jenny Donohue is now in New Orleans. Stephen Katz is at the University of Toronto. And just as Emma was talking about linchpin, the process of data-informed school improvement is really around, we need to first figure out what are we wanting to work on. So we need to define some objectives, then collect data validate and organize and explore that data, do analysis and get some visualizations. And this is what LAC does really well. And then use those visualizations to draw conclusions. And what I like about this is actually thinking of it as a spiral where we then put in an intervention. So you have gathered the data, you made asked some questions of the data. Now let's do an intervention in place and then ask again of the data whether the intervention had the impact that we're hoping to have. So if that can happen at a school level, the question is, can that happen at an association level? So this is our mission of CAIS. We are an accreditor, and what we're trying to do is help schools continually improve through the advancement of standards. And we often talk to schools about the fact that we don't want accreditation to be a normalizing feature, meaning that when you have 98 schools, you don't want them to start to look like each other because of accreditation. So I like this quote by Paulo Coelho because it really talks about figuring out who we are as an organization at the core and really learning to become that by unbecoming all the other sort of copies that we sometimes take on when we're working with other organizations or people. So just to give you a quick heads up on who we are, 98 schools, that includes day and 29 boarding schools. We run 2 annual leadership conferences, so we do a lot of professional development, we do a lot of research, we have 12 standards that are internationally accepted, and we educate about 55,000 students in this country. So this is sort of gives you a sense. We're spread across 7 provinces in Canada, as well as Bermuda. We have 2 schools in Bermuda, and you can see how we actually use data to get a sense of what's happening in different parts of the country. As an accreditor, we are sitting at the table of ICASA with many of the other accreditors that you would recognize. NIASC, WASC, Council of International Schools are very common accreditors in the international space. And so we are also looking at our data from accreditation as a way to help schools improve. So our accreditation framework is a full school framework. It looks at this value proposition of this school through strategic pillar number 1, which is strategic directions. Schools are about education, so we have an entire pillar dedicated to education that has standards related to teaching and learning, as well as custodial care. And then finally, schools are also about adults, and supporting the adults in the building comes through pillar 3 in school operations, where we look at standards like HR, finance, working with families, alumni, trustees, etc. We have a 5-year accreditation cycle, so the joy of this is that about 1/5 of our schools are undergoing accreditation at any given point of time. And we can use that data from about 1/5 of our schools, about approximately 15 to 20 schools every year, to help us inform and improve this process. And each school, remember, is going to re-enter the cycle 5 years from now. So now you can see we've got 2 data gathering points that are 5 years apart, and we can look to see what are the interventions that might be happening at that school in that 5-year period, and we can potentially see what growth might be happening. I'm hoping that this framing is helping you see the work of how Amanda Datnow, Jenny Donoghue, Stephen Katz, etc., which is about data-informed school improvement, can be used at the association level as well. So let me give you some examples of the kinds of data-informed school improvements that we've been engaged in. The first example I'm going to use is our benchmarking dashboards. This was actually a dashboard that we collaborated with the LAC to develop. And why did we do that? Well, when I first arrived as the CAIS Executive Director in 2022, what I realized was that we were actually supporting schools tremendously with school data, but it was actually flowing as Excel spreadsheets that were being emailed back and forth between the provider and the school, as well as 600-page PDF reports that were sitting and getting printed off and put on shelves. So there's a couple of pieces there. Number 1 is the data is actually not as accessible as it could be. Number 2 is data privacy concerns. Email is not a secure form of communication, neither Excel files. And so we really wanted to move, our objective was to move from a sort of email-based, PDF-based model to a dashboard that was not static, was a dynamic dashboard that could be secured using a single sign-on. And so we could get both data privacy and better responses. So what we decided to do is we partnered with Lynchpin because we know they can build the dashboard, but then we also created a whole bunch of committees made up of business officers and heads who really could help us see how do they use the data? Why do they need the data in certain ways? So that we could actually get their input when designing the dashboard. And so then we created the dashboard. So I'm going to give you a quick view of our dashboard. The dashboard actually consists of two different parts. One part is for schools. That is a school site that I cannot show you because it contains proprietary data for each school. So there are, in fact, 90 separate dashboards, one for each school, that contains incredible amount of school data that's valuable to the head, the board chair, etc. In addition, we have this national dashboard, which actually gives us aggregate benchmark data for around the country. So if you remember, we had an accreditation platform that was consisting of 12 standards organized into 3 pillars. So you'll see those same standards are in fact being used to create KPIs. So if I go into financial metrics, I can actually look at specific KPIs for each of those financial standards. So for example, I might look at working capital ratios. I have the ability to actually change the years that I'm looking at for the working capital ratios. So if I wanted to look at post-COVID or pre-COVID or include COVID, I have that option. I also have the option here of actually looking at schools by region. So Vancouver, Toronto, East Coast. We can also look at them by size of schools, because the working capital ratio might be different for small schools. I might want to compare that just with small schools or large schools, whether they're day or boarding schools, whether they have younger students, whether they're K through 12, whether they have older students. So it really allows folks to actually dissect the data, ask questions of it, create hypotheses, and then explore those hypotheses through the dashboard. So as you can see, this is far different than a PDF file with 600 pages. You actually get all of the same facility, but you have more control and you can ask more interesting questions. And you'll notice up top here, it has my name. So it is a secure dashboard. Folks have to log in and they go through a single sign-on. That is our association management system. So there's an example of the kind of intervention where we've actually taken data and activated it. So what are the benefits? Well, we've improved data security and privacy. That's a non-negotiable in this day and age. We've improved data visualization, and we actually have been able to give more people access. So rather than that one PDF that might be collecting dust in a business office, now the board chair has their own access, the director of operations has their own access, the director of finance has their own access, and we can also shape which pieces of the data can they input, which pieces of the data can they see. So what this allows for is supports Jenny Donahue's work around collaborative inquiry, which is we empower school leaders to not only have the data, but become data literate so that they can sit and have conversations about how they can use the data to move the needle on different areas of school operation. And that aligns with our mission, which is continual school improvement. So if folks are actually sitting around the table talking about what is different, then that's where the start of conversations about improvement occurs. So you can see we've defined the objectives, we collected the data, we organized it, we created visualizations. Now we're helping schools draw conclusions. And in fact, David Goodman, our manager of research programs, provides individualized and group support, because giving people visualizations without the literacy tools to be able to use them doesn't take the conversation forward. So it's really important to also have supports available so people feel comfortable and have that data literacy piece along with the, yes, I have all this information, but I can draw all kinds of wrong conclusions if I don't actually understand why the data are organized the way they are. So we're pretty excited about this benchmarking dashboard, and this was a great partnership with Lynchpin. But I also want to talk to you about a different way. While the benchmarking dashboard was a real productive conversation with Lynchpin, we were also looking at governance. And sometimes data-informed school improvement does not require high levels of data analysis. So, or you don't necessarily always need a visualization dashboard for work like this. So we as an association have noted, along with other accreditors around the world, that governance is a key mover or shaper of school sustainability. And so we really wanted as an accreditor to be able to support governance. And so in 2021, CAIS actually put together, and we're one of the very few organizations that has a governance guide. So we printed a book, and that book is used by all of our schools as a way to train governors. And because boards of governors are made up of volunteers in Canada, like in most countries, and we're talking about nonprofit schools here, these are volunteers, are often their parents, they might be community members, they might be alumni, and they might be very successful in the work that they do in their day-to-day lives, but sometimes they don't necessarily have knowledge of how schools should operate or how nonprofits operate. And so the governance guide became this resource that was developed in consultation with our schools to help them become better governors. Well, going back to our data-informed school improvement model, what we were also doing is, because about 20% of our schools are going through the cycle in any given year, we were actually collecting data. So Brenda Montgomery, our Director of Accreditation, was collecting data from our own accreditation on where we were seeing gaps in terms of schools meeting the standard. At the same time, Jefferson Burnett and Bonnie Rickey at the International Council Advancing Independent School Accreditation had done a massive governance study looking at multiple accreditors around the world to look at how governance was playing out in schools. And what both research, Brenda's research as well as ICAIS's research, showed is that governance fundamentals, so boards still struggle with understanding how to operate as a board of governors. That's what's coming back again and again in our school recommendations. So I'll show you here, for example, is a very simple but very effective data set. So this is a spreadsheet that has about 31 schools. So each school is a column and each row is one of our 12 standards. And what you can see here is I've highlighted governance in yellow. And what you're seeing is that each of the schools is getting different numbers of recommendation in that one standard. So the first school got 4 recommendations in governance, the second got 9, the third got 10, the fourth got 7, etc., etc. But on the far right-hand corner, you'll see the average and the maximum number of recommendations. And what you'll notice is that on average, governance has actually generated 4.2 recommendations for these schools. That's the highest number of any standard. So we have that data. How do we act on that data? So what we decided to do is we actually decided we have a book, and with the book that people have, we're getting 4.2 recommendations on average. So what would happen if we were to activate the book? Would we were to use the book not just as a passive text that people we hope are reading, but could we run a series of governance upskilling workshops? And so this year, what we've done is we've launched these upskilling workshops where we've brought in experts from around the country. So these are folks who teach governance at our business schools. These are folks who teach governance at NAIS, the National Association of Independent Schools in the US. And so they're coming in and they're actually working with our boards. So what we're doing is we're using the governance guide as a resource, but we're having conversations, we're engaging in collaborative conversations. So boards are joining from around the country and they get a chance to be in virtual breakout spaces, have conversations about the topics, do case studies, and really deepen their knowledge of what governance looks like in our school. That's the intervention. Then the question is, when we go back, now that we have a year of intervention, 2 years of interventions, 3 years of interventions, and as Brenda gathers data from these schools, that data should be able to tell us if that 4.2 average number of recommendations per standard starts dropping, then we might be able to say, oh, maybe our intervention had a positive impact. If those numbers don't, then we can say, okay, well, the intervention we're doing is not necessarily having the impact. So we have to now ask the question, what kinds of recommendations are they? Maybe we've addressed governance fundamentals, and now the recommendations are coming in a more sophisticated, different part of governance. But you can see what this also means is, as an accreditor, we have to constantly engage with the data and we have to critically examine the work that we're doing. And we really have to also say, as an association, when we're providing support, we have a measure of the efficacy of our interventions. And that's really aligned with the notion of data-informed school improvement. So at CAIS, our 4 values are: we are a community of schools. We believe we're stronger when we come together. We also believe we have a responsibility to be bold and to constantly be learning. And to do that, we also have to learn from others and share our knowledge. And we believe that global perspectives are really important. So you can see in this conversation, being part of LAC is part of that global perspective. Having folks getting involved on the ground floor in terms of determining what are the parameters, why are we building these tools, what interventions are we going to do, is about communities working together in leadership and learning. So our values are coming to life in both of these examples of data-informed school improvement that we're trying to do as an association. And ultimately, this is our vision, right? Our hope is that the work that we do is going to help us be leaders in education. And we're doing this because we care and we want the school to develop a world that is courageous and compassionate. So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to thank you for being here, and I'll take any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Anand. It's really interesting for me thinking about this idea of accreditation. I think all the accrediting bodies that I'm aware of, they're all moving away from this. It's not an inspection. We're all about growth, and there's a lot of talk about evaluation becoming this data-informed improvement cycle. And yet, I think in practice, that's really hard to do. And it's so hard to get away from the box checking and things. And so I can see the power of having the dashboards and having people really engaging with that data and seeing the impact of their interventions in real time, how that really inspires that action and that moving forward. And it's a real leading by example as well, and modeling the behaviors that we want to see in schools.
And I think that's so important because I think, the do as I say and not as I do model doesn't really work, right? Like I always have told, when I used to do teacher education, I'd always say, kids can see you for who you are like that, right? Like there is no fooling kids. And I would say it's the same is true for schools, right? I think schools want to partner with authentic organizations that are actually living their values.
Yeah.
And compliance is an important component, but it's sort of the floor of accreditation. And if all we're doing is compliance, and we're sort of so low on the sort of hierarchy of where the real fruit is. And so I think continual improvement is really sort of trusting our schools. And I think part of the evolution is really around the fact that our schools are becoming more and more professionalized as the years go on. And certainly accreditors, 20, 30 years ago needed to do a lot more compliance checks because our schools weren't quite as professional as they are now. Now our schools are run by people who have PhDs or MBAs or have masters and really understand, leadership and change management, and we have HR departments and we have advancement departments. Before it was one head doing everything. And so that allows the accreditors to also trust that schools have processes and structures in place. And once we know that they do, then we can move on to continual improvement with a fair bit of safety because the risk is much lower.
Absolutely. And thinking about that in terms of how much space schools get to move, when you're talking about them meeting the standards and you have your dashboard for each standard, is that the same data that all schools are collecting in there, or do schools get the opportunity to show the different ways they might be meeting that standard with different data points?
A very good question. Yeah, so in fact, the two examples are actually two different sets of data in the sense that the first example of the benchmarking is the data that the school has and is using it to try and show us that they're meeting standards. The second set of data with the governance that you saw is, in fact, you could call it almost metadata in the sense that it's actually the accreditor's data, where what we've done is we've summarized the entirety of the output of a school on each standard and boiled it down to one number. And so that's also important to keep in mind that one number is both reductive, but also contains in it a huge amount of work that the school put in. And so it's important to take that into perspective. And we also sort those numbers by sizes of schools or where they are, because we also want to make sure that we're not comparing a school of 50 students to a school of 1,500 students. We might have very different resources available, or a
Mhm.
school that's operating with reduced tuition to a school that has an endowment that is in the millions of dollars, because again, that's going to impact the how of the what they're doing.
Yeah.
So
It's very cool to see what you guys have done with the platform, and thanks for showing us. I know we have Brenda on the call as well. Brenda, I don't know if you have anything that you wanted to add or any other questions that you had.
No, it's just Anand has really been inspirational in leading this charge and taking us towards some data-informed ideas, and it's all very, very exciting.
Yeah, it sounds like your work within that has been really essential as well, and important work. So
Well, it's interesting work. It's really fascinating to look at what's coming out of this, and hopefully it will inform some of our professional learning as well.
and the fun part is to have a great collaborator like Brenda, right? Because it's actually like I mean, we have the Learning Analytics Collaborative, right, in our association, because we collaborate very deeply on doing analytics of our own learning, right? And that's important to us. And so, yeah, we're pretty excited on this journey, and we share it with other accreditors, and we're not at all sort of proprietary about this work, because we do believe that a rising tide lifts all boats.
amazing. Thank you so much for sharing where you're at and where you're going. It's really inspiring. It's really cool to see. Appreciate you taking the time.
Always, you're very welcome. Thanks for inviting us, and thanks for being a partner with us.
Thank you.